The stars above Kepler, too, to be had, always been beautiful. Captain Park Yuna remembered watching them as a child, dreaming of the worlds that waited beyond the sky. Now, standing on the observation deck of Colonial Defense Station 7, she watched those same stars disappear behind a wall of alien warships. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They emerged from hyperspace, like a swarm of metal insects, blocking out the light of distant suns. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their hulls were black and smooth, covered with weapons that glowed with a sickly green light. Yuna's hands did not shake. She had trained for this moment her entire life. Every soldier in the United Earth Defense Force knew that humanity was not alone in the universe. They knew that someday something would come for them. Today was that day. Her communication device buzzed. She answered it without looking away from the window. "Captain Park," said a calm voice. "This is Admiral Kim Tae-ho aboard the Indomitable. I assume you can see our visitors?" "Yes, Admiral. I count at least 800 capital ships. Probably more behind them. Our sensors agree. They call themselves the Kelthari Dominion. They have sent us a message." Yuna finally turned away from the window. "What do they want?" "What they always want," the Admiral said. His voice carried no fear, only a quiet coldness that Yuna had learned to recognize. It was the voice of a man preparing for war. "They want us to surrender. They have given us 12 hours to accept their terms. Complete submission. Our colonies will become their property. Our people will become their servants. And if we refuse, they will destroy us." The Admiral paused. "At least, that is what they believe," Yuna smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "What are your orders, sir?" "Evacuate all civilians to the underground bunkers. Prepare your Marines for ground combat. And Captain," the Admiral's voice hardened, "do not let them take our people. Whatever happens, do not let them take our people. Understood, Admiral?" The line went dead. Yuna turned to her lieutenant, a young man named Cho-Wan who had been listening to the entire conversation. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. "You heard him," Yuna said. "Sound the alarm. Get everyone underground." "And Juan?" "Yes, Captain. Start rigging the buildings. Every street, every intersection, every doorway. If they want this colony, they will have to dig it out of the ashes." Juan nodded and ran to carry out her orders. Yuna took one last look at the alien fleet, then went to prepare her soldiers for the fight of their lives. Far above the planet, aboard the largest ship in the Kelthari fleet, Supreme Commander Voroth watched the human colony with cold satisfaction. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and forearms that ended in sharp claws. His eyes were black and empty, like holes in his skull. He had conquered 37 species in his long career. Humans would be number 38. "They are not responding to our message," said Sub-Commander Thel, who stood beside him. Thel was younger than Voroth, with lighter skin and a nervous habit of clicking his claws together. "Perhaps they did not understand it." "They understood," Voroth said. "We broadcast it in their primary language. They are simply processing their fear. Soon, they will accept the truth of their situation. If they do not..." Voroth made a sound that might have been laughter. "Then we will teach them. Every species resists at first. It is natural. But resistance requires hope, and hope requires possibility. When they see our power, they will understand that there is no possibility of victory. They will surrender as all species do." Thel was not so sure. He had studied the human transmissions that the Dominion had intercepted over the years. He had watched their entertainment, read their history, analyzed their behavior. Something about them worried him, though he could not say exactly what. "Their history shows many examples of conflict," Thel said carefully. "They seem to fight among themselves constantly," as Voroth agreed. "They are a divided species, weak, emotional. They fight over resources, over beliefs, over things that do not matter. This is why they will fall so easily. A united empire will always defeat a fractured one." Thel wanted to argue, but he held his tongue. Voroth was the supreme commander. His word was law. The 12 hours passed slowly. On the planet below, humans moved with desperate efficiency. Families gathered their children, and fled to underground shelters. Soldiers checked their weapons and said goodbye to loved ones. Engineers worked through the night, turning peaceful buildings into deadly traps. On Ares Station, a research facility on the edge of the system, Dr. Basora watched the alien fleet with quiet fury. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had spent her entire life studying the universe. Now aliens had come to take everything she had built, Doctor said one of her assistants. Should we prepare for evacuation? No, Sora said. We should prepare for destruction. Begin deleting all research files. Everything about our weapons, our technology, our biology. If we cannot keep it, neither will they. But Doctor, years of work can be rebuilt, Sora interrupted. But only if there are humans left to rebuild it. Delete everything. Now. The 12 hours ended. Vorith waited for the human surrender. It did not come. He checked his communications. There was no message, no plea for mercy, no offer of negotiation. There was only silence. Interesting, Vorith said. They choose death. Perhaps they are still deciding, Thel suggested. No, they have decided. Vorith stood and walked to the center of his command deck. They have decided to make us kill them. Very well, we will grant their wish. Begin the assault. Kalthari fleet moved forward. Weapons powered up across 1,000 ships. The first orbital bombardment began, raining fire down upon the human colonies below. Vorith expected to see chaos. He expected to see humans running in terror, their defenses crumbling, their will to fight dissolving like smoke. That was what always happened. That was what every species did when faced with the unstoppable power of the UN. Dominion. But something strange happened instead. The humans fired back. From hidden positions across the planet, human weapons opened up on the Kalthari landing craft. Missiles streaked through the sky. Soldiers emerged from buildings and bunkers, their faces hard with determination. They did not run. They did not hide. They fought. The first Kalthari ground troops landed, expecting easy victory. They found death waiting for them. Human soldiers attacked from every direction, using every weapon they had. The fighting was brutal and bloody, and the Kalthari advance slowed to a crawl. Vorith watched the battle reports with growing confusion. This was not how it was supposed to happen. This was not how any species behaved. They are not surrendering, Thel observed quietly. They will, Vorith insisted. They simply have not accepted reality yet. Give them time. Give them death. They will learn. But deep in his ancient heart, Vorith felt something he had not felt in centuries. He felt the first cold touch of doubt. The forests of Kepler-2 to be had become a graveyard. Kalthari soldiers moved through the trees in tight formations, their weapons ready, their sensors scanning for any sign of movement. They had been told that human resistance would collapse within hours. That was 3 weeks ago. Sergeant Lee Dury watched them from behind a fallen tree, her breath slow and steady. She counted 12 aliens in this patrol. Too many to fight directly. But she was not planning to fight directly. She raised her hand and made a silent gesture. Around her, 7 human soldiers crept into position. They had no armor, no heavy weapons, nothing that would show up on alien sensors. They had only knives, wire, and patience. The Kalthari patrol passed beneath a large tree. Dury waited until the last alien had crossed the invisible line she had marked in her mind. Then she pressed a small button on her wrist. The explosion was not large, but it was precise. The tree fell directly onto the patrol, crushing 3 aliens instantly. Before the survivors could react, Dury's squad attacked from the shadows. It was over in seconds. Collect their weapons, Dury ordered. Leave the bodies. I want the next patrol to find them. One of her soldiers, a young man named Kong Minho, looked at her with tired eyes. Sergeant, we have been doing this for weeks. We kill 10, they send 100. We cannot win like this. We are not trying to win, Dury said. We are trying to make them bleed. Every soldier they lose here is one less soldier attacking somewhere else. Every day we hold them is one more day for our people to escape. She put her hand on his shoulder. We are buying time with our lives, Minho. It is the only currency we have left. They disappeared into the forest before the next patrol arrived. miles away. In the ruins of the colonial capital, Captain Park Yuna was fighting a different kind of war. The Kelthari had bombed the city from orbit, turning tall buildings into mountains of broken stone. They thought this would make the humans easier to find. They were wrong. Yuna had grown up in these streets. She knew every alley, every basement, every hidden passage. The ruins were not a trap for humans. They were a trap for aliens. "They are moving through Sector 7, Lieutenant Chowan reported, looking at his portable scanner. "About 40 soldiers. Heavy weapons," Yuna said. "Let them get to the old hospital, then blow the charges." Juan hesitated. "Captain, the hospital was my grandmother's. I used to visit her there when I was young." Yuna looked at him with understanding, but no sympathy. "And now it will be a tomb for our enemies. Your grandmother would be proud." Juan nodded slowly, then returned his attention to the scanner. When the Kelthari reached the hospital, he pressed the detonator. The building collapsed with a roar that shook the ground. 40 aliens died in an instant. This was how humans fought. Not with grand battles and glorious charges, but with traps, ambushes, and sacrifice. Every street corner became a killing ground. Every building became a potential bomb. The Kelthari never knew where death would come from next. Supreme. Commander Vorath received reports of the fighting with growing frustration. His armies had conquered entire planets in less time than this. His soldiers had defeated enemies with technology far beyond these primitive humans. Yet somehow, his forces were bogged down, bleeding, dying. "Our casualties are unacceptable," Sub-Commander Thel reported. "We have lost 6,000 soldiers in ground combat alone. Our supply lines are constantly attacked. Morale is declining." "Then increase the orbital bombardment," Vorath ordered. "Destroy everything. Leave them nothing to hide behind." "We have tried that, Commander. When we destroy their cities, they move to the forests. When we burn the forests, they move to the mountains. They refuse to stand and fight where we can destroy them." Vorath slammed his fist against his command chair. "Then capture them. Take prisoners. Make them tell us where their forces are hiding." "We've taken prisoners," Thel said quietly. "They do not talk. Everyone talks. Use pain. Use fear. Break them." Thel was silent for a long moment. "We have tried, Commander. They do not break. One prisoner laughed at us while we questioned him. He was dying and he laughed. He said we did not understand humans at all." Vorath did not respond. He stared at the tactical display, watching the endless cycle of attacks and counterattacks on the planet below. For the first time in his career, he did not know what to do next. Thel returned to his quarters that night with a heavy mind. He could not stop thinking about the dying human who had laughed at them. What kind of species laughed at death? What kind of creature felt joy while being destroyed? He began to research human history. The Dominion had captured many human transmissions over the years, including historical records and educational programs. Thel spent hours reading about human wars, human conflicts. Human struggles, what he found, disturbed him deeply. He read about a place called Stalingrad, where humans fought for months in frozen ruins, refusing to surrender even as millions died. He read about Thermopylae, where 300 warriors held back an army of thousands. He read about the Alamo, where a tiny group of defenders chose death rather than defeat. The pattern was always the same. When humans were pushed into a corner, when defeat seemed certain, they did not give up. They fought harder. They became more dangerous, not less. It was as if surrender was simply not part of their nature. Thel found a human phrase that kept appearing in his research. "Give me liberty or give me death." He translated it carefully, trying to understand its meaning. The concept was foreign to his species. Kelthari valued survival above all else. When defeat was certain, surrender was logical. It preserved resources, preserved lives, preserved the possibility of future resistance. But humans did not think this way. To them, some things were worth more than survival. Freedom, honor, family, home. They would die for these things. They would die smiling. Thel closed his research files and sat in the darkness of his quarters. He understood now why the dying human had laughed. The The Kelthari had come expecting to conquer a weak and divided species. Instead, they had awakened something terrible. They had given humans a reason to unite. They had given them an enemy to hate. And humans, Thel now realized, were very, very good at hating. He should report his findings to Vorath. He should warn the commander that this war would not end the way they expected. But Thel knew that Vorath would not listen. Vorath had conquered 37 species. He could not imagine that the 38th would be any different. On the planet below, Captain Park Yuna stood in the ruins of her city and looked up at the stars. The alien fleet still hung in orbit, blocking out the light. But Yuna was not afraid. She had received a message from Admiral Kim Tae-ho. The relief fleet was coming. Humanity was not giving up. They were gathering their strength, preparing to strike back. "We just have to hold on," she told her soldiers. "We just have to keep fighting. Help is coming." Sergeant Leadery appeared from the shadows, her face covered in dirt and blood. "My squad is ready for another mission, Captain." "Where do you want us?" Yuna smiled grimly. "Everywhere. I want you everywhere. Make them afraid to sleep. Make them afraid to eat. Make them afraid of every shadow and every sound. We cannot beat them with strength, so we will beat them with fear." Duri nodded and vanished into the night. The war continued. Humans died by the thousands, but they did not surrender. They could not surrender. It was simply not who they were. And slowly, painfully, the Kelthari began to understand what they had started. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the UEDF Indomitable and watched the stars pass by. His fleet was small compared to the Kelthari armada. 42 warships against nearly 1,000. By any logical calculation, he was leading his people to their deaths. But Kim Tae-ho had not survived 3 colonial wars by following logic. He had survived by understanding one simple truth. Wars were not won by numbers. They were won by will. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "we are receiving transmissions from Kepler-2 to B. Captain Park Yuna reports that ground forces are still holding. Casualties are heavy, but morale remains strong." "And the enemy fleet? Still in orbit? They have spread their ships to cover all 3 colonies. Their formation is thin in several places." Kim Tae-ho nodded slowly. The Kelthari had made a mistake. They had expected a quick victory, so they had not prepared for a long war. Their supply lines stretched across light years of space, protected by only a handful of ships. If those supply lines were cut, the invasion would starve. "Change course," the admiral ordered. "We are not going to Kepler-2 to B." His officers looked at him with surprise. "Sir, our people are dying down there. Our people are fighting down there," Kim Tae-ho corrected. "And they will continue fighting whether we arrive or not. But if we attack the enemy fleet directly, we will lose. We need to be smart. We need to be patient. We need to make them bleed from 1,000 small cuts." He pointed at the star map. "Here, here, and here. Kelthari supply convoys. Lightly defended. Full of fuel, weapons, and food. We hit them fast, we destroy everything, and we disappear before their main fleet can respond. We make them afraid to send supplies. We make them hungry. We make them weak." His officers understood. It was not a glorious strategy. There would be no great battle, no decisive victory. But it would work. The human fleet scattered into small groups and began their hunting. For the next 2 months, Kelthari supply ships died in the darkness between stars. Human warships appeared from nowhere, launched their missiles, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Convoys that once traveled safely now required heavy escorts, which pulled ships away from the invasion force. Supreme Commander Vorath watched his resources drain away with mounting fury. His soldiers on the ground were running low on everything: ammunition, medical supplies, food, water. The humans had poisoned the local water sources and burned the crops. His army was beginning to starve. "This is impossible," Vorath growled at Sub-Commander Thel. "How are they doing this? Their fleet is tiny. They should be hiding, not attacking." "They are not fighting a conventional war," Thel said. "They are fighting the way their ancestors fought, with ambushes, with raids, with terror, then find them and destroy them. I have tried, Commander. They refuse to engage in direct battle. When we send ships to hunt them, they simply move somewhere else. They know our patrol routes. They know our weaknesses. It is almost as if they understand us better than we understand them. Vorath dismissed Thel with a wave of his claw. He refused to believe that these primitive creatures were outsmarting him. There had to be an explanation. There had to be a way to win. On Ares Station, Dr. Bay Sora had made a decision that would change the course of the war. The Kelthari had sent ships to capture the research station, hoping to steal human technology. They expected the scientists to surrender peacefully. They were wrong. Sora had spent her life studying the universe. She had built reactors that could power entire cities. She had designed engines that could push ships to the edge of light speed. And now, she would use all of her knowledge for a single purpose. Destruction. Doctor, said one of her assistants. The enemy ships are approaching. We should evacuate. No, Sora said calmly. We should fight. Bring me the reactor controls. She had modified the station's main reactor over the past weeks, turning it into a bomb of incredible power. When the Kelthari ships docked with the station, thinking they had captured an easy prize, Sora activated the self-destruct sequence. The explosion was visible from orbit. 3 Kelthari cruisers were vaporized instantly. 2 more were crippled beyond repair. The station was destroyed, but so was the enemy force sent to capture it. Sora died in the explosion, along with the dozen scientists who had chosen to stay with her. Their names would be remembered forever. News of the sacrifice spread across the human colonies. It spread to the relief fleet. It spread to Earth itself. Humans everywhere heard the story of the old scientist who had turned her life's work into a weapon, who had chosen death over surrender, and something changed in the human spirit. Fear became anger. Despair became determination. If Dr. Bay Sora could give everything for her people, then so could they. On Kepler 2-B, Captain Park Yuna received word of the sacrifice. She gathered her surviving soldiers in the ruins of the capital and told them the story. When she finished, there was silence. Then, one by one, her soldiers began to cheer. The Admiral is coming, Yuna said. Our fleet is bleeding the enemy dry, and now it is time for us to strike back. Tonight, we take back our city. It should have been impossible. The Kelthari held the capital with thousands of soldiers, supported by tanks and aircraft. Yuna had only a few hundred Marines left, most of them wounded and exhausted. But humans did impossible things when they were angry enough. The attack began at midnight. Human soldiers emerged from the ruins like ghosts, striking from every direction at once. Lieutenant Chowan led a team that destroyed the enemy command center with planted explosives. Sergeant Lee Duri's squad ambushed the alien reinforcements, delaying them long enough for the main assault to succeed. By dawn, the human flag flew over the capital once again. The cost had been terrible. Half of Yuna's soldiers were dead, but they had won. Admiral Kim Tae-ho received word of the victory aboard the Indomitable. He allowed himself a small smile, the first he had shown in months. Then he opened a communication channel that broadcast across all frequencies, human and Kelthari alike. This message is for Supreme Commander Vorath of the Kelthari Dominion, the Admiral said. His voice was calm and cold, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. You came to our home. You threatened our children. You demanded that we kneel before your power. You believed that we would surrender because we were weak. You were wrong. He paused, letting his words sink in. But we are not weak. We have never been weak. You mistook our kindness for weakness, our peace for cowardice, our divisions for fragility. You could not have made a greater error. Kim Tae-ho stood taller, his eyes hard with centuries of human defiance. Your supply lines are broken. Your soldiers are starving. Your commanders are dying. And we have only begun to fight. This is not a war you can win. This is not a war you will survive. You have awoken something ancient and terrible in the human soul. You have united us against a common enemy. And now you will learn what it means to face humanity when we have nothing left to lose. He ended the transmission and turned to his officers. Set course for Kepler 2 to B. It's time to finish this. Far away, aboard his flagship, Supreme Commander Voreth listened to the human admiral's words. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he did not recognize. It took him several minutes to understand. What it was? Fear. Sub-Commander Thel stood before Supreme Commander Voreth with his datapad clutched in his 4 hands. He had spent sleepless nights preparing this report, knowing that his commander would not want to hear it. But the truth could no longer be ignored. "We are losing this war," Thel said. Voreth's black eyes narrowed. "That is impossible. We have superior numbers. Superior technology." "Superior? We have none of those things anymore," Thel interrupted. It was dangerous to interrupt the Supreme Commander, but Thel no longer cared. "Our numbers have been cut in half by guerrilla attacks and supply raids. Our technology means nothing when the enemy knows how to avoid it. And our soldiers are afraid, Commander. They are afraid of an enemy that does not fear death." Voreth stood and walked to the observation window. The planet Kepler 2 to be hung in the darkness below, still burning in places from the orbital bombardment. After months of war, the Kelthari controlled less territory than when they started. "I have called for reinforcements," Voreth said. 300 more ships. They will arrive within the week. Then we will crush these humans once and for all." Thel shook his head. "More ships will not help us, Commander. The humans fight differently when we send more soldiers. They become more creative, more desperate, more dangerous. You speak as if you admire them." "I am trying to understand them," Thel said. "That is the only way we can defeat them. And I believe I finally do understand. I understand why they will not surrender, no matter how many we kill." Voreth turned to face him. "Then explain it to me." Thel took a deep breath. "The Kelthari fight for survival. When we face defeat, we surrender to preserve our lives. It is logical. It is rational. But humans do not fight for survival. They fight for each other." He activated his datapad, showing images from the war. Human soldiers carrying wounded friends to safety. Human pilots crashing their damaged ships into enemy vessels. Human civilians attacking Kelthari patrols with nothing but rocks and farming tools. Every time we kill a human, we do not weaken them. We strengthen them. The survivors become angrier. They fight harder. They take more risks. To them, surrender is not a logical choice. It is a betrayal of everyone who died before them. Voreth stared at the images for a long moment. "This makes no sense. How can a species survive if they refuse to surrender? They should have destroyed themselves long ago." "They nearly have," Thel admitted. "Many times, their history is filled with wars that killed millions of their own kind. But they always survive. They always rebuild. Because underneath all their fighting, they have something we do not." "What?" "Love," Thel said quietly. "They love each other. Not in the way we understand it, but in a fierce and terrible way. They will die for their families. They will die for their friends. They will die for strangers they have never met. And that love makes them more dangerous than any weapon we possess." Voreth was silent. Then he laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "You have gone soft, Sub-Commander. Love is a weakness. It makes creatures emotional and irrational. It will be their downfall. With respect, Commander, it has been our downfall. We attacked their colonies because we thought they would surrender their loved ones to save themselves. Instead, they fight to protect their loved ones. We gave them the one thing that makes humans truly dangerous, a reason to fight." The reinforcements arrived 5 days later. 300 Kelthari warships dropped out of hyperspace and joined the invasion fleet. Supreme Commander Voreth smiled for the first time in months. Now he would show these humans the true power of the Dominion, but Admiral Kim Taho had been waiting for this moment. The human fleet had not been idle during the weeks of guerrilla warfare. They had been preparing. Mining the space around the colonies with hidden explosives, positioning ships in asteroid fields where sensors could not find them, setting the stage for the greatest trap in human history. When Voreth ordered his combined fleet to attack, Kim Taho ordered his ships to retreat. the Kelthari pursued, sensing victory at last. They chased the human fleet through an asteroid field, ignoring their tactical advisors who warned of danger. The trap sprung closed like the jaws of a beast. Mines exploded everywhere, crippling dozens of ships. Hidden human vessels emerged from the asteroids, launching missiles at point-blank range. Disabled human ships, rigged to explode, drifted into the Kelthari formation and detonated. The battle of the asteroid field lasted 3 hours. When it ended, 200 Kelthari ships were destroyed or disabled. Human losses were severe, but the enemy fleet had been crippled. On Nova Gaia, the second colony world, something even more unexpected happened. The Kelthari had declared the planet pacified weeks ago. The human population had stopped fighting. They had accepted Kelthari rule, or so the aliens believed. In truth, the humans of Nova Gaia had been waiting. They had hidden weapons in their homes. They had memorized the patrol routes of their occupiers. They had smiled at Kelthari's soldiers while planning their deaths. On the night of the asteroid field battle, they struck. Every Kelthari garrison on the planet was attacked simultaneously. Soldiers were killed in their barracks. Supply depots were burned. Communication towers were destroyed. By morning, Nova Gaia was free. The message spread across the galaxy. Humans did not surrender. Even when they appeared to surrender, they were simply waiting for the right moment to strike. Lieutenant Cho Wan did not survive to see the liberation of Nova Gaia. He died leading a boarding action against Supreme, Commander Voreth's flagship. The mission was simple: cripple the enemy command ship. The execution was suicide. Wan and his team of 20 Marines launched themselves at the flagship in small boarding pods, knowing that most of them would be shot down before they reached the hull. Wan was one of only 3 who made it inside. The other 2 died covering his advance through the ship's corridors. He fought his way to the engine room alone, his armor cracked, his body bleeding from a dozen wounds. Kelthari soldiers surrounded him. They ordered him to surrender. Wan looked at them with calm eyes and smiled. "We do not surrender," said. Then he detonated the explosives he had carried with him. The blast tore through the flagship's engine systems. The great ship shuddered and went dark. Supreme Commander Vorath was thrown across his command deck as his vessel became a drifting tomb. When the emergency power finally came back online, Vorath received a communication from Admiral Kim Tae-ho. "This is your one chance to withdraw," the Admiral said. "Take your remaining ships and leave our space. Do not return." Vorath stared at the screen with hatred burning in his black eyes. "You think you have one? You have won nothing. You have delayed the inevitable. The Dominion will send more fleets, more soldiers. We will return and we will destroy every human in existence." "Perhaps," Kim Tae-ho said calmly, "but not today, and not by you." Vorath cut the communication. He would not retreat. He could not retreat. His pride would not allow it. He began planning his final assault, gathering every ship that could still fly. But deep in his mind, a question burned that he could not answer. What kind of creatures were these humans? Who laughed at death and counted suicide as victory? What kind of species refused to stop fighting even when all hope was lost? He did not understand them. He realized now that he had never understood them, and that lack of understanding would cost him everything. Supreme Commander Vorath stood on the broken bridge of his crippled flagship and made the decision that would end his life. He would not retreat. He would not negotiate. He would gather every ship still capable of flight and make one final attack. Not on the colonies. On Earth itself, if we destroy their homeworld, he told Sub-Commander Thel, their spirit will break. They fight so hard because they believe they are protecting something. Take that something away, and they will collapse. Thel wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that destroying Earth would not break human spirit. It would set it on fire. But he could see the madness in Vorath's eyes. The Supreme Commander was beyond reason now. He had been humiliated by creatures he considered inferior, and his pride demanded blood. "As you command," Thel said quietly. The Kelthari fleet limped toward Sol, the human home system. 300 ships had become less than 200. Many were damaged. All were low on supplies. But they were still a terrible force, capable of burning a planet to ash. What Varath did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the war began. When the HFY fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Earth, they expected to find a weakened defense. A few old ships, orbital platforms, easy targets instead. They found every warship humanity had ever built. The United Earth Defense Force had called everyone home. Ships from every colony, every outpost, every research station. Retired veterans had reactivated their old vessels. Merchant ships had been fitted with weapons. Even the massive generation ships, still under construction in orbital shipyards, had been armed and crewed. Over 400 human ships faced the HFY fleet. They were smaller. They were older, but they were crewed by people who would rather die than see their homeworld burn. Admiral Kim Tae-ho broadcast one final message to his fleet. Today we fight for everyone we have ever loved. Today we fight for everyone who will come after us. Today we show the universe why humanity has survived every threat it has ever faced. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. We do not stop fighting until the last one of us is dead. And even then, our ghosts will haunt our enemies forever. The Battle of Seoul began. It was the largest space battle in human history. Ships died by the dozens on both sides. Missiles filled the void like swarms of angry insects. Lasers carved burning lines through the darkness. Explosions bloomed like flowers of fire against the backdrop of distant stars. Captain Park Yuna commanded the cruiser unbroken from its bridge. She had survived the ground war on Kepler 2b. She had watched her friends die one by one. Now she had one last mission. Her ship was badly damaged. Half her crew was dead. The engines were failing, and the weapons were nearly out of ammunition. But she could still see Vorat's command ship through the smoke and fire of battle. "All hands," she announced over the ship's speakers. "This is your captain. I am going to ram the enemy flagship. Anyone who wants to leave may use the escape pods. There will be no shame in survival. No one left." Every surviving crew member stayed at their post. Yuna smiled. "Then let us end this together." The Unbroken accelerated toward Vorath's ship. HFY weapons fire tore through its hull. Compartments decompressed. Fires broke out across every deck. But the ship kept moving, driven by the will of its crew. Supreme Commander Vorath saw the human cruiser approaching. He screamed at his gunners to shoot it down. They tried. They failed. The Unbroken would not die. In the final seconds before impact, Captain Park Yuna closed her eyes and thought of home. She thought of the stars she had watched as a child. She thought of the parents she had lost in the first attack. She thought of the soldiers who had died following her orders. "I am coming to join you," she whispered. The Unbroken struck Vorath's flagship at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the battlefield like a second sun. Supreme Commander Vorath died instantly. His last thought was a question that would never be answered. What are these creatures? Sub-Commander Thel witnessed the explosion from his own ship. He felt no grief for Vorath. He felt only exhaustion, and a strange sense of respect for the enemies who had defeated them. He took command of the remaining HFY fleet. Fewer than 50 ships were still capable of flight. The humans had lost more, but they had more to lose. The battle was over. The war was over. All ships, Thel ordered, retreat to hyperspace. "We are leaving." Admiral Kim Tae-ho saw the enemy fleet beginning to flee. He could have pursued them. He could have destroyed every last ship, but he chose not to. "Let them go," he told his officers. "Let them carry the message home. Let them tell their people what happens when you attack humanity." The HFY fleet vanished into hyperspace. They would not return. 5 years later, Sub-Commander Thel stood before the HFY High Council. He was old now, his gray skin marked with the scars of that terrible war. The council had summoned him to explain his actions. They wanted to know why he had retreated, why he had recommended that humanity be designated a Deathworld species and placed on the permanent exclusion list. Thel looked at the ancient leaders of his people and spoke the truth. I retreated, because we could not win. Not that battle. Not any battle against humans. We could kill them by the millions, and they would keep fighting. We could destroy their worlds, and they would build new ones. We could conquer their bodies, but never their spirits. One of the council members leaned forward. They are just animals. Soft, weak, short-lived animals. How can they possibly threaten the Dominion? Because they are not fighting for the same things we fight for, Thel said. We fight for territory, for resources, for power. These are things that can be measured, traded, surrendered, but humans fight for ideas, for love, for freedom. These things cannot be measured. They cannot be traded, and they will never be surrendered. Took a deep breath before continuing. Humans have a saying, give me liberty or give me death. I used to think this was just words, empty sounds meant to inspire their warriors. But I watched them prove it true over and over again. They meant it. Every single one of them meant it. They would rather die free than live as slaves. And because of this, they cannot be conquered. They can only be destroyed. Every last one of them, down to the final child. And even then, I am not certain they would truly be gone. The council chamber was silent. Thel could see the fear in their eyes now. Good. They should be afraid. If we ever attack humanity again, he concluded, they will not stop fighting until either they are all dead or we are. There is no middle ground. There is no negotiation. There is only war without end. I recommend that we never speak to them again. Never look at them again. Never even think about them again. Some species are not meant to be conquered. Humans are one of them. The council approved the designation. Humanity was added to the exclusion list, marked with the highest possible danger rating. A warning was broadcast to every species in the Dominion's sphere of influence. Do not attack humans. Do not provoke humans. Do not give humans a reason to fight, because when humans fight, they do not stop. On Earth, a memorial was built for the heroes of the war. Their names were carved into black stone that would last for 10,000 years. At the base of the memorial, a simple inscription told the universe everything it needed to know about the species called humanity. They asked us to surrender. We answered. Admiral Kim Tae-ho visited the memorial every year until he died. He stood in silence before the names of the fallen, remembering their faces, their voices, their courage. They had given everything so that humanity could remain free. Their sacrifice was not forgotten. It never would be. Humanity spread across the stars in the centuries that followed. They built new colonies, explored new worlds, and met new species. Some of those species had heard the stories about the human HFY War. They treated humans with respect, and sometimes with fear. The humans did not mind the fear. They had earned it, and deep in the heart of every human, it's passed down through generations, lived the knowledge that had saved their species from extinction. Some things are worth more than survival. Some things are worth fighting for until the very end. Some things are worth dying for. Humans never surrendered. They never had. They never would. That was simply who they were.